Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in. This is the Positive Vibes podcast. I am your host, Kelly Fitzgerald. I have an amazing guest this morning. We're going to talk about everything that we can come up with to talk about on this podcast. So thank you very much for being my guest today, James. Welcome. I want to talk about your book first. Let's start with your book and go from there.
Super cool, Kelly. Hey, thanks for having me on. It's my honor to be here. Seriously, yeah. So, my book is titled Leadership is Not Enough. And that's a fascinating topic if you think about the fact that I have a doctorate in organizational leadership, consider myself to be a great leader. I was an executive for 20 plus years. And then I write a book saying, yeah, leadership really isn't everything that the whole world is making it out to be. You really have to build your foundation first. And that's basically the concept of my book, is that if you build the right foundation, the operating environment that employees work within, then you can maximize the effect of great leaders and minimize the effect of terrible ones, because the people are operating in an environment that helps them thrive.
Okay. Let's talk about how to do that. And we were talking a little bit before I hit record that I have some coaching students right now who are having a really difficult time in the current business environment and the political stuff and everything that's going on in the world, where they are having trouble starting that foundation. And how do they go about doing that? How do you start?
Yeah, well, we can first, tangentially say that the challenge we have gotten to in organizations is when we brought politics in and allowed that, when I grew up in orgs, politics stayed out of the workplace. We showed up to work and we did our job. If you didn't like your job, you could leave. But what you couldn't do is lament on someone else's political views or their religious views or anything else, right? Or their sexual orientation views. These were all taboo topics, and somehow they got blended into the workplace. So, in full transparency, they really don't have a place in the office, because the point is everybody in the workplace is there for a reason to work, right? And what I always choose to do is focus on what unites us, and what unites employees is their workflow, right? That's what brings them together. And it's really important for people to understand how their goals align, right? So that you can understand the workflow of the team when you understand how all of the individual metrics and KPIs align to create a successful organization. So I am a fan of what's called transformational leadership. It is my leadership style.
Okay.
And transactional leadership is basically you do X, I give you Y, right? It's very basic, and it's what exists in most places. Transformational leadership goes beyond that, and it says, listen, you're showing up for a job. Why? What do you hope to achieve, right? And the ultimate objective here is to align a person's intrinsic goals with their professional goals, so that in the end, they are pursuing their personal goals and their business goals in symbiosis. And so you can create that environment where everybody's together and everybody's invested in the success of the organization, because the organization's success is their success at the same time. And when you can create that environment, then you can remove a lot of the obstacles to what divides us. And you can focus on what unites us and then bring everybody together.
Yeah, I think sometimes for a young person just starting out, having employees for the first time, they're kind of like, like a deer in the headlights, and they don't want to say anything that is going to upset an employee to the point where they're going to quit, especially a business like a coffee shop or sandwich shop where you need every single, body you can find. So
For sure.
That's just, I know a couple of people in those situations, and the more they try to, delegate to an employee, are you ready for more, responsibilities? Are you've got this person who's saying, yeah. And this person over here is going, well, why are they, doing that? And it's difficult to get someone to understand, because you're not ready for this. This person is stepping up. You are not, doing that. So I think that's
the challenge, Kelly, is 85% of first line managers in organizations in this country receive no training to be a manager.
Right.
85%, right? If you go back 30 years and you go into a bookstore and you go to the book section, gosh, it's probably 40 years by now. Now we'll just go with 30. All the books on how to manage people, right? We understood how hard the frontline manager's job was. And we as a world focused on helping them be managers. And so we taught them how to be managers.
Right.
Um, and then and then we switched to this whole leadership. I'm going to call it malarkey because if you're not teaching a person how to manage an employee, then you are setting them up to fail and
Right.
you are setting your people up to fail because everybody's different. And one of the best for all your readers, one of the books that I gave to every newly promoted manager was called First Break All the Rules, written by the Gallup organization, a very long time.
Yes.
Very good book for every frontline manager to read. And I highly recommend it, right? Because, the problem again is you take somebody who's good at a job and you promote them, and then they just try to get everybody else to do the job the way they did it. Well, unfortunately, it doesn't work because they're not you, or they would have got your job, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to recognize that they're not you. And you have to understand what makes them unique. What are their strengths? What are their weaknesses? Why are they showing up for the job every day? And how do you help them achieve that through the organization's objectives?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that is, I agree with you. I think we've gone a little bit overboard on the whole leadership thing. Some people
Yeah, and
don't.
honestly, Kelly, I think it's a cop out. Like, oh well, we don't have to train our people. We're just gonna everybody leads and
Right. Right.
everybody self leads, and it's just so great. Well, you know what? We all have hard days and we all have bad moments, and so you have to understand how to work with that, or you just fail.
Right. Right. You do absolutely. And that's kind of brings us to a fear of failure conversation I had with someone the other day. When you have these goals and you have these dreams, and these young people that I've been working with are so talented and they're just so intelligent and so gung-ho, and then they get into the situation and they get into where business is opening, grand opening, and they're trying to be all their employees friends
Mm.
instead of telling them what to do. If you're not delegating, they're gonna run over you. Yeah, and that is a hard lesson, I think, for people to learn.
Yeah, one of the first lessons, you're absolutely right, Kelly. One of the first lessons I tell every newly promoted manager is welcome to leadership. It's a lonely place.
Yeah.
It's extremely rewarding.
Yeah,
And you're no longer anybody's friend. You have to be prepared to fire them. You don't get to be angry. You don't get to have emotions anymore, right?
right,
You need to be there for your people. Your job is to lift them up, to develop them, to make them better, to teach them how to take your job, not to do their job for them, but to teach them how to take your job, right? And so that's leadership is lonely. You're no longer buddies anymore, and that's a hard place for people to make the mental shift.
right. That is very, very difficult, especially if they have made what I consider a horrible mistake and hired a friend.
Yeah.
Don't, I don't, no, no. But when
No.
they do that, it's really just adds a whole other layer of ick, what I call the ick, on top of them, because now you've got to, can you have an employee who is a friend? I think that takes two very, you know, determined people to make that situation work. I don't think it works alone.
Yeah, absolutely. You really do. I mean, I'll tell you, I have lots of employees who I consider a friend and they consider me a friend. But I was never considered an easy boss, right? I remember once I had my director of finance come into me once, and I asked him questions that upset him. And I said, you do understand this isn't personal, right? This is my job to ask you these questions, and it is your job to know the answers. So let's, do you want to continue with this, or do you want to sit down and let's figure this out? It was a really good moment for us because it was, my bad, Jim. Cool, no worries. Sit down. Let's talk. Right? Like again, it's also a recognition that people are human. They are gonna have emotions,
Yeah,
and you as the leader can't let those emotions get to you.
right.
Right? You don't get to have emotions anymore. Right? Like somebody blows up, you need to stay calm. You need to help them get through whatever it is that's going on so that you can drive forward for the org's performance. Because if your org's not growing, it's dying. And if it's dying, you're all going to be out of a job anyway. So you should probably focus on the performance.
Yeah. How do you help people take that emotional aspect out of those difficult conversations? That seems to be a really hard thing. People get stuck in their egos, I think, too much in order to have those difficult conversations. So what would you tell
Well,
someone? How do they do that?
I mean, unfortunately for many people, they're just egotistical no matter what.
Right.
Right. And there's nothing you can do about those people. They are just the cat's meow, which is a weird saying, by the way. But they just think that they're all that. And so for many people, you can't correct that. For everybody else, it's coaching. It's back to the conversation of leadership is lonely. You don't get to have emotions. One of the things I like to say is to use the word pause. And when giving directions to an employee, pause, then ask them what you just told them. Ask them what they heard. And you'd be amazed the disconnect between what you said and what they heard. And
Yeah.
that gives you an opportunity to course correct, right?
Right.
So when a supervisor feels themselves reacting negatively, and I do this, I say, you know what? Let's revisit this conversation. If I can't check my emotion, and pause the conversation until we can have it,
Yeah.
right? Because again, I'm the leader. I don't get the luxury of emotions anymore. Unless my emotion is rah, rah, you're doing great, keep it up. Everything else I don't get to have.
Right.
So there are times when I have to pause and say, okay, let's revisit this. And we'll come back when we have calmer heads.
Yeah. I think that's a really important thing for anyone to do, business or in their personal lives. If emotions are so high, you're not going to hear the other person and they're not going to hear you. So you
Yeah.
have to pause and just, revisit it later. I think sometimes people end up making really bad decisions when they don't pause.
Yeah. An emotional decision is rarely the right one.
Right, right. Absolutely. Is there anyone or any type of person that you think should probably not go into business for themselves? I get that question a lot.
Who should not be an entrepreneur, go into
Yeah,
business for
or or
themselves?
or be the boss. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, or the boss. Ooh, those different questions.
yeah.
You know, um, Being an entrepreneur is hard.
It
It
is.
is a grind. You are alone. The hardest part about being an entrepreneur is not having a boss,
Right,
right? I mean, the nice thing about having a boss is you have somebody you can ask questions from
right.
of. Right? So, um, it Gallup latest state of the workplace shows that the significant majority of employees, I forget the direct stat, but significant majority of employees dread the conversation with their manager
Yeah,
or supervisor, right? And that's because 85% of the people managing have never been taught how to manage, so they don't know how to have conversations, and so they just wing it every single time. Um, so the type of person who shouldn't be a manager, I just think, is that arrogant person, right? I mean, you need to, there's two views on life: scarcity versus abundance,
hmm,
right? And that's kind of hard to define, but you want the abundance person, the person who says, I need to train you to take my job so that I can get another job,
right.
versus the scarcity that says, oh, I have this job and nobody can take it, right? That's just a different mentality altogether.
Yeah, absolutely. I was in real estate for a very long time. And one of the things that we taught agents was they're building relationships. Sales, real estate, you're building a relationship. You want those people to come back. You want their kids to come back. You want that. But you have to leave the office to meet the people. And I think sometimes working with different entrepreneurs, they're afraid to leave the office. They're afraid if
Mhm.
I leave, I can't take a vacation. The world will fall apart if I take. So I think that's a piece of it. And I think that does come from ego, absolutely. But you have to get past that. And that is not something anyone can train you to do, even if you had a boss. That's something
Yeah.
you have to have the faith in your people that you've hired and trained. So
If the leader has to be there for the team to perform, you have failed.
yeah, right.
Hard stop. There's not hard stop. If you have to be there for the team to get the job done, then you have failed. Right. So you need to create, that comes back to my model. You need to create that environment where people can thrive and get their work done and understand how all of them are working together. So they hold each other accountable, they lift each other up, the work is being done, and you're just there to give attaboys. or
Right.
girls, out of people's,
You're right.
right?
Right.
That's your job, right? Because everybody already understands very clear metrics. Everything's clearly defined, right? And the problem for so many small companies is that they have not given clear metrics for every employee. That whole adage of other duties as assigned is just thrown around. And in the end, employees walk into their annual reviews and they have absolutely no idea how it's going to go because they never had their metrics and KPIs reviewed on a regular basis,
Right.
right? So you need to create the environment where that level of accountability is transparent for everybody so that everybody knows how they work together as a unit to drive the performance of the organization so that they as individuals can succeed in their personal life.
Right. And you have to let go of the control so
Mhm.
much. If
Yeah.
you're an entrepreneur, I have seen people manage themselves right out of business because
Oh, yeah.
they don't give up the control. You may have the best people in the world working for you, but if you don't allow them to do their jobs, you're gonna fail anyway.
Yeah. And one of the keys to that is letting people fail.
Yeah.
You have to let your team make mistakes. And
Yeah.
that's good from a learning organization. I always say, listen, I don't care you make a mistake once, just don't do it again.
Right.
If you
Right.
made a mistake once, it's on me because I didn't make sure that that didn't happen. I didn't train you properly. I didn't put the systems in place. I didn't put in guardrails. I allowed you to make that mistake, not you, me, because I'm your leader and I didn't stop that ahead of time. You made the mistake. Cool. What do we learn from it? What do we need to change? Right? What's our new process to
Right.
make sure that that issue never happens again? If you have not created a psychologically safe environment where employees are comfortable failing on something, then you have failed miserably.
Right. In today, when I started in business, this was not a thing, it really wasn't a thing. But today there are so many added things that trip people up. And we talked about it earlier where, politics has no place in a business, but there are so many people right now that are so dead set against the other person, whoever it is. I'm right, they're wrong. No, that's it. How do you handle that if you have two employees who just do not get along? How would
Um,
you handle it?
well, focus on the work. If that not getting along is affecting the work, well, now we have to have another conversation,
Right,
right? So I would just focus on the work and not the emotions, right? Like, you don't like them. I don't really care if you like them. Are we working together?
right,
Right? Because that's what matters. And again, it comes back to, why do you have your job? What are you looking for? How can the organization help you get it? The fact that you don't like this person should not affect your ability to do your job because you're invested in your own success in this organization, right? Um, and so many people, you mentioned coffee shops and restaurants and that kind of thing, and how hard it can be to hold staff. Amen. I understand that. If the people understand why they have the job and how this job is helping them achieve their goals, and how the org recognizes and acknowledges that, and that regular conversations happen with their manager, regular meaning weekly or monthly at minimum, not halfway through the year when it's, oh, now let's see how you're doing. It's a regular communication, right? If you're having that regularly scheduled conversation, then the people understand how their performance is being viewed and how it works in the org. And so, these types of conflicts can be mitigated by meeting with your people on a regular basis and focusing on the work, not the personalities.
right. And I think sometimes business owners make a mistake of making those meetings a party instead of, we're talking about work here and there's a grill going and somebody's making margaritas and, that's
That's
that
not a meeting.
always puzzles me. Why?
That's not a meeting. Yeah. So a meeting, every meeting, in my book, I talk about this, and it's a lesson I learned from my uncle, is that every meeting is a 50-50 meeting.
Mhm.
And what that means is half of that is quantitative, half of that is qualitative. You have to talk about the numbers. Why? Because if everybody doesn't have visibility to the success of the organization, then they're lost. They have no idea how they're fitting into the success and how the success is helping them, right? Again, back to that transformational connection, symbiotic relationship. So you have to talk about the numbers. The other half is qualitative, right? It can be training, can also be grilling and making margaritas.
Right.
Cool, right? It can be qualitative. So you have to have both in order to have a good meeting.
Right.
I always start every meeting and end every meeting with, start every meeting. What's going on? What's new in your lives? Let's converse, right? Let's just talk. All right, cool. Now let's get into metrics. All right, cool. Now let's get into, are we going to do training? Are we going to go party? Are we running a Dave and Buster's? What are we doing? Let's do it, right? But you have to have both. You can't have one or the other. I've been in too many meetings where, it was all numbers, and at the end, it's like, everybody know what to do? Good, great, bye. And everybody's just standing there like deers in a headlight saying, okay, that was motivating, right?
Right.
And I've also been in the grill meetings, right? Where I'm just like, okay, this is neat and all, but I got work to do. Why are we here? Right? And so if that's explained as part of the reason for the meeting, then everybody can engage in that differently.
Right. Right. That's especially in the real estate industry. I've never seen so many meeting that were actual parties other than in that industry. It's just, and it was always incredible to me. It's like, I can be out doing something. So yeah, and that is still
Yeah.
going on. That is still going on. And I still don't
Yeah.
understand it. You have to
So
have.
Kelly, what's fascinating about that is if you look at Maslow's hierarchy of needs, right? The baseline is safety and security. And that is, food upon your table and a roof over your head, right? And that's compensation. That's the baseline, right?
Right.
Most orgs, they don't really focus on it in the sense that they don't create an environment where people feel that they're thriving. They give them just a bare minimum. Don't even get me started on that topic. And then they try to jump up to these altruistic forms of recognition. And what they fail to recognize is the power of social bonds. And social bonds, people quit, bosses stay for teams, right? The power of the social bond amongst that team to drive performance is so powerful.
Yeah.
And a barbecue is not going to get you there.
Yeah.
Margarita party's not going to get you there. You want to create social bonds, you need to look at your accountability metrics. You need to look at your training program. You need to look at your recognition, and you need to look at your communication strategy, your internal communication strategy. And how do those four elements support the social bonding between your team? If you can't find out how they support the social bonding in your team, then you better figure out how to make it, because you'll never reach long-term performance, and you'll never get people at the higher levels of Maslow's hierarchy, because just like any pyramid, each foundation has to be strong.
Yeah. I've seen too many, especially in sales type organizations, where they pit people against each other. And that is absolutely the worst thing that
The worst.
you can do. But
yeah.
Want to once again mention the name of your book, which is Leadership is Not Enough. And I'm, of course, speaking with Dr. James. I'm going to get it wrong.
Chitwood.
Chitwood. It is really, because I was going back and forth with, it can't be Chai. No, it's, but I'm terrible with mispronouncing people's names. So.
Well, I grew up in Southern California with a lot of Hispanic friends, and Debbie. So I've heard it all.
Yeah,
And
I'm sure. Yeah, I am sure. I had a maiden name that was very difficult, and I was, here, go ahead, here it is, try it, give it your best shot. That's kind of the way it is sometimes. But what led you to writing your book?
Yeah, great question. I was in higher ed for a very long time. I've been a university president, multiple VP positions, campus presidents. And then I left that, and I was in the ed tech startup space for a while, and I'm an ops person. So I kept building operations and then basically operationalizing myself out of a job. Because the truth of the matter is, once you build a good op, you don't need your VP to build it anymore. You need your director to run it, because it's running, right? And so I did that over and over and over. And I married up. And so my wife kept saying to me, Jim, what are you doing? Are you going to keep operationalizing yourself out of a job again? Or are you going to go consult? Because I keep telling you to go consult. So I couldn't do it if I didn't have an original thought, Kelly.
Right.
So, I spent the last startup. I did it in 9 months and then moved on. And so my wife's like, "What are we doing, Jim? You gonna do it again, or are you gonna go consult?" And so I had that aha moment. I spent a few days praying, discerning, listening to the universe, just trying to grasp what's out there. And I had my aha moment. I figured out my original thought, and then I felt I could bring something into the world. And so that's what caused me to go write my book. And here's a fascinating thing about it, Kelly. Everybody thinks the American military is built upon great leadership. It's actually a fallacy.
Yeah.
Leadership, great leaders are the outcome of the military system. It is the system that operates the American military, not the leaders. And the evidence of this is your leadership rotates every 2 years and your enlisted corps rotates every 4. If it was all about the leaders and the people, you'd never have a consistent performance, but it's not. Everybody knows their jobs. Everybody knows how all their jobs work together, and they all understand how the system functions as a unit and as individuals, so that if there's any breaks, they can all pick it up and keep going. My time in leadership, I can't tell, or my time in the military, I can't tell you how many times leadership changed over for me. And I quickly realized later on how irrelevant those leaders really were, because we knew how to get our job done.
Right. Right. And that's an important piece, I think, of starting any business, is you have to put that system in place. And you may not get it
Think
right
like
the
a
first time,
franchise.
you know,
No, you
but
better not be right the first time, right? Like, you have to pivot, you have to iterate, right? You have to recognize that tomorrow's not today. Tomorrow we better be doing it differently. We need to be a learning organization. And if you're a learning organization, that two things are constant. One, failure is okay. And two, pivoting is expected.
yeah, yeah, has to be. You have to stay open enough to see other ways that you can be doing things. And I think people get too laser focused on this is it, this is it, this is it. Well, maybe this is it, so
Yeah. And Kelly,
people,
they don't listen. Back to your arrogant point.
right,
So many people, I know all the answers. I am
right,
the boss. Right. And I always say your frontline employees are your canary in the coal mine. If you're not listening to the canary, you're going to die in that mine.
right.
So listen to your front line, even if you don't agree with them, listen to them and tell them why you don't agree with them. Don't just talk it off, but show them you're listening. Explain why their suggestion won't work so that they can see the bigger picture. Or say something like, you know what, that's a great idea. We can't afford it right now, but I will look at the budget for next year and see if we can pull that off. That right there is huge for an employee.
Yeah, yeah. So often, employees don't feel like they're listened to at all. So even something like that is like, whoa, at least I was heard,
Yeah.
that's,
Yeah.
and if you're looking at a company where you expect people to advance up in your organization, that's even more critical.
Yeah.
When you have people who don't feel like they're listened to, anytime you hire a new person, they're going to hurt here. They're not going to listen to you. And then you're going to have it's an infestation is what it comes down.
Yeah, but one of my performance model has 4 elements: training, recognition, accountability, and communication. Communication, I think, is just, I don't like when people say, Jim, what's the one thing a company can do? Because I believe it's way too complex for that. I get the question all the time.
Mhm.
But I say, okay, if you need a one, fix your internal communication. Fix that, right? Companies spend so much money on their external communication, and then they just turn around and spit it back at their people. And I call that brand speak, and people see through it really quickly. And if you don't have an internal communication strategy that is 3-way, up, down, up, and sideways, if you don't have a strategy like that, that's running and operating every single day, you're never going to get there, because people need to be listened to.
They do, and especially if you have an employee who is going through something. I
Mhm.
again recently I talked to someone about this. Um, if you have an employee that maybe doesn't say what's going on, but you can tell something's off, I think it's really important to have a conversation. You don't know what they've gone through. And in that particular instance I'm thinking about, um, both parents were killed in an accident. And this is a 23-year-old business owner
Mm,
who is just
mm.
like, ah! and other people were coming in and saying, look, something's wrong. What's going on? And just, I don't know if he's stuck in ego or stuck in, these are people I work with. I don't need to bring this here. But how do you get someone to kind of open up, or, having people feel heard is awesome, but you have to get them to talk first. So how would you
Yeah.
handle that?
So I believe that every one-on-one needs to be structured. You need to have standard questions that you're asking. Most managers, they just sit down and they wing it, right? And so I'm a
Right.
real big believer in that structured conversation. And part of that structured conversation has to be, again, why do you have this job? How does this go? How does this job fit into you? What's going on in your personal life, right? What's happening there? And the reason you ask, and they say, well, why you ask that? So that I can better help prepare for any changes that might be occurring. Your wife might be pregnant, and you may need to save for that, or you might want a different house, or you might want a car, or you might want to go on vacation, or your kid might need braces, or some of these other things, right? And so if I don't understand what's happening in your personal life, then I can't help prepare for that. And our org needs me to help prepare for that. So I can't help you if you don't tell me what's going on, right? And so that's part of that qualitative part of the conversation. Even your team meetings have to be 50-50. Your one-on-ones have to be 50-50, half numbers, half qualitative.
Right. There are just some situations that I think are a little bit more complicated that people
Sure.
might be going through.
Hmm.
But I do think that communication is the all important thing. You have to encourage
Yeah.
people to open
Yeah.
up and talk, and they
And
have
at first they
to
may
feel
not,
safe. Yeah,
right?
right.
You have to show that you authentically care. If you
That's
if
that's the
like
one.
if you don't authentically care, people see through the bull,
They
right? And so you're never going to get there if you ask them once and then never ask them again. It probably take 3 times for them. Like, okay, he really does want to understand.
right.
Okay, right? Like, trust isn't built in a day.
Right. No, it isn't. And people sometimes in companies don't feel safe talking about
Hmm.
what's going on. And I think that authenticity really helps people open up. Um,
Yeah.
it kind of depends on the individual, but where I am, there are a lot of people who are American citizens, and yet because of their names or their race, they're treated like they might be illegal. So they don't open up to
Mm,
anything at all. And that's become a big problem here.
sure.
It's just
Yeah.
assumptions. Well, you look like this, so you must be that. And I
Hmm.
think anytime you have that in an organization, it's really difficult to root out, really difficult to fix those things because society, on top of your structure, you know, you've got the society structure that is also impacting that. So I think people need to be a little bit more open-minded, a little bit more ready to listen and make up their own minds rather than listen to what that person said that to that one and that one and that one, those
Yeah, Kelly,
kind of
you
culture is
know,
really devastating.
yeah, for sure, for sure. Bigotry isn't, no one's born a bigot, right? Biases are learned.
Hmm.
Right, we learn our biases. We don't just have them. I mean, you can take 3 children from opposite sides of the planet and stick them in the same playpen and they'll just perfectly play with each other
Yeah.
and they could care less, right? Just like you can put a lion cub and a lamb cub in the same room and they aren't going to do anything to each other but play, right? We learn these things, right? And so some of that takes retraining. It takes open dialogue, right? And you have to help people understand. Again, focus on what unites us, not divides us, because way more unites us than divides us as a people. Like it's not like if you put the two things next to each other, there it's pretty absurd what people focus on from the division standpoint because there's so much more that brings us together.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If there are any last things you would like to tell people, I think we're um, wrapping up here.
Yeah, just spend the time to help your employee
Yeah,
see how their success and your success are intertwined so that they better trust you to help them be successful. And your job as a leader is to lift them up. It has nothing to do with you anymore. Sorry.
right. Absolutely. That's, yeah, that is a big thing. When you make that decision to become a business owner or the leader, you do give up a lot, an
You
awful
do.
lot. It's
Yeah.
not
Yeah. And
for
business
everybody.
owners, they never get a vacation, right? They don't, they can't not answer the phone,
Right.
right? That's a hard place to be. So yeah, they deserve compensation, and yeah, they deserve some deference. It doesn't make them a god.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you so much for being on the show. It's
Thank you, Kelly. It's been a great conversation.
it's been a great conversation. I know it will help a bunch of people. They're in my head already. So that's
Great.
why I do this is to help people. So thank you so much.
Yeah.
The book again is Leadership is Not Enough. Please check it out. I will put links below the video on YouTube. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching. We'll see you next time. Bye.